Hello, and welcome to Risk Management for Student Leaders, brought to you by the Center for Student Involvement. So why do we have to talk about risk management? Well, House Bill 2639 does mandate that the University of Houston provide risk management education training for registered student organizations of all types. We also really just want to make sure that you understand the importance of having fun and safe events and that you're prepared. So what is risk? Risk, by definition, is the exposure to the chance of injury or loss, or a hazard or dangerous chance. Risk management is when you actually identify potential or perceived risk in your organization's activities and work to try to plan to avoid or minimize those risks from taking place. There are many different categories of risk that could affect your organization at any time. In this video, we're going to focus on organizational risk as well as event risk. Let's start with organizational risk. Organizational risk can cover many different topics, from hazing to alcohol and drugs. In this particular video, we're going to cover organizational risk as it pertains to organization travel as well as financial negligence. Let's start with organization travel. Let's start with an example. You and your organization members have decided to attend an off-campus conference a few cities over. One member volunteers to drive the group in their personal vehicle. While on the road, the organization member who offered to drive gets into a car accident and an organization member gets hurt. So who's responsible if the organization member who was driving doesn't have car insurance? Are you considered to be on organization business? Is the organization liable? It's important that when traveling for organization business that you consider the insurance that all drivers have. It's best to make sure that all drivers are adequately insured and able to cover damages if they occur so that it doesn't fall back on the student organization. If traveling for organization purposes from the University of Houston campus, it is required that you submit a travel roster to the University of Houston Police Department. To access a travel roster, go to any search bar and type UH Travel Roster. When considering international travel, whether it's for pleasure or a mission trip, there are a few steps that you want to take before you go. You want to be sure that you check in with the Learning Abroad office here on campus to ensure you have all paperwork and approvals in place before your trip. To contact the Learning Abroad office, you can reach them at learningabroad@uh.edu. That's it for organizational risk as it pertains to travel. Next, let's talk a little bit about financial negligence in student organizations. So what does financial negligence look like? It can actually come in many forms, and one is not having a checks and balances for your organization. Checks and balances can be as simple as having more than one person sign off on checks, approve purchases, or go on organization shopping trips. It should never just be one person that holds all the money. It's also important that more than one person review the budget. Great financial practices include bringing the budget to every meeting and reviewing all expenditures and deposits with the organization members or the e-board and making adjustments and voting to accept that it's correct. Lastly, not planning for event costs properly. All too often, we come across organizations who overspend on events hoping to get a large return, and then not making the money they need to make the expense worth it. It's important to think about the organization long term and how much you can really afford to spend and still sustain the group. That wraps it up for organizational risk. Next, we'll take a look at event risk and how to actually make a risk management plan. When thinking about event risk, the first question you should ask yourself is, what is it that I want to do, and how am I going to actually minimize the risk associated with it? When thinking about how to actually minimize your risk by developing a risk management plan, there are 3 areas to consider: the planning phase, the implementation phase, and the utilization phase. In the planning phase, This is where you'll consider all of the different components of your event and then think about the risks that are associated with those activities. In the implementation phase, this is where you're establishing the just in case and what if moments. For example, if I wanted to have food at my event, I may say, what if someone has an allergic reaction? I should be sure that I have labels on food just in case. The utilization phase of developing a risk management plan is when you actually use the plan that you've created. You want to be sure that you are utilizing the plan and evaluating the plan during as well as after your event. When considering how to approach risk, we use the T method. T is for transfer. You have the option to transfer the risk to a third-party vendor who may have insurance to cover any damages. For example, with food, instead of making it yourself, your organization could hire a catering company. E is for eliminate. You have the option to get rid of the risk. This happens often when the risk outweighs the reward. For example, with food, you may just decide that you don't want to have food at your event at all. A is for accept. You have the option to accept the risk. This means you feel the reward outweighs the risk and you're willing to accept the consequences for the risk, but will take action to make sure it is minimized to the best of your abilities. Finally, M is for modify. This option allows you to move forward with the risk, but perhaps change it to a lower level. For example, with food, instead of preparing a food that may be of a higher risk, I may choose to go with a lower risk item such as cookies or pizza. Got it? Awesome. Let's try together. This is the risk management matrix that is used by the Center for Student Involvement. We look at 5 areas of risk, including physical risk, reputational risk, emotional risk, financial risk, and facilities risk. When looking at possible risk, it's important to think through all of the things that could go wrong as it pertains to each of our event activities. For example, with food, a few things that could go wrong are an allergic reaction, not enough options to eat, and a mess or spills. As you can see, we've added a few additional possible risks for inflatables and music. Next, we will look at our level of risk for each of our items listed by examining our matrix on the following page. For our example, we'll look at food with a possible risk of an allergic reaction. This is the risk management matrix. Here, we look at the probability that something will go wrong versus the severity of the risk if it does go wrong, and it gives us a letter that corresponds to the level of risk associated with it. As stated, we're looking at our event activity of food with a possible risk of an allergic reaction. At a general event, the probability that someone may have an allergic reaction is most likely seldom, but if they did, the severity could be critical, leading us to M. M is for moderate risk. On the front of the matrix, we would need to assign a letter to each risk, so we will place an M next to allergic reaction. Looking at the matrix, we can also see that both not enough options or choices, as well as mess and spills, fall in the low risk area, so we could put an L next to both. Once we assign a level of risk to all of the possible risks for our event activities, we'll move on to creating a risk management plan for each. For example, with an allergic reaction with a moderate level of risk, a good risk management plan may include labeling food items with any allergens that may be contained within. Once we come up with risk management plans for all of the possible risks for our risk management matrix, we want to think about the values of our organization and why it's important to think these things through. One reason could be because we want to be sure to provide an inclusive environment and protect our organization's reputation as well as UH. Organizations that have an event with attendance over 200, alcohol, or high-risk activity will be required to have a high-risk consultation with the Center for Student Involvement. We may require your organization to complete the risk management matrix, so it's important that you understand the different components and how to create a plan. We want to be sure that you understand the need to take care of yourself, others, as well as the University of Houston community. We hope that you're planning fun and safe organizational activities for everyone. We hope you were able to gain some valuable information about risk management as it pertains to student leaders. Remember, risk management is everyone's job. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you soon in the Center for Student Involvement. Bye.